Hello there, America. It's that time again, the time when we all come together to decide who will lead our country for the next 4 years. Yes, it's election season. It's election season again, which means it's time to dust off that old chestnut, the Electoral College. This system has been a part of our democratic process since the founding of our nation. But how much do we really understand about it? Now, you might think you know how to pick a president. You vote, right? You go to your polling station, cast your ballot, and wait for the results. Simple, right? Well, it's a bit more complicated than that. You see, your vote is important, but it doesn't directly decide who becomes president. Instead, it contributes to a larger, more complex system. In America, we don't directly elect our president. Instead, we use a system called the Electoral College. This system was established by the Founding Fathers as a compromise between electing the president by a vote in Congress and electing the president by a popular vote of qualified citizens. Instead, we have this system where 538 people you've probably never heard of get to decide who runs the country. These people are known as electors, and they are chosen by the political parties in each state. It's a bit like a game show where you spin the wheel. But then Steve Harvey hands the $1 million to the guy in the Hawaiian shirt next to you. It can feel random and unfair, especially when the popular vote doesn't match the Electoral College outcome. It doesn't seem fair, does it? Many people feel frustrated and disillusioned by this system, especially when their candidate wins the popular vote but loses the election. That's because, in many ways, it isn't. The Electoral College has been the subject of controversy and debate for centuries. There have been several instances in history where the candidate who won the popular vote did not become president. But hey, that's the Electoral College for you. It's a system that was designed to balance the power between the states and the federal government, but it often leaves voters feeling confused and powerless. It's confusing, it's controversial, and it's been around for centuries. The Electoral College was established in 1787, and it has been a part of our election process ever since. But is it still relevant today? So buckle up, because we're about to break down this American oddity and see if it still makes sense in the 21st century. We'll explore its origins, how it works, and the arguments for and against it. Stay tuned as we dive into the weird way we pick a president. Let's start with the basics. Voting is a fundamental right and a cornerstone of democracy. It's the way we, as citizens, have a say in who leads our country and makes decisions on our behalf. But the process isn't as straightforward as it might seem. Every 4 years during the presidential election, each state gets a certain number of electoral votes. These votes are crucial in determining the outcome of the election. Think of these electoral votes as points in a game. The candidate who collects the most points wins the presidency. The number of points or electoral votes a state gets is based on its population. The more people live in a state, the more points it gets. This is why states with larger populations have more influence in the election. Take California, for example. With its massive population, it has a whopping 55 electoral votes. This makes it a key player in the election. On the other hand, a state like Wyoming, with a much smaller population, only gets 3 electoral votes. This disparity can have a significant impact on the election. It's like a rigged game of Monopoly where some players start with Boardwalk and Park Place, and others are stuck with Baltic and Mediterranean Avenue. The rules are the same, but the starting conditions are vastly different. Now, when you cast your vote for president, you're not actually voting directly for them. Instead, you're voting for a group of electors who are pledged to support your candidate. These electors are the ones who ultimately cast the votes that decide the election. These electors are usually party loyalists who promise to vote the way their state voted. They are chosen by their political parties and are expected to uphold the will of the voters in their state. The electors meet in their respective states to cast their votes for president and vice president. This process is known as the Electoral College, and it's a unique feature of the American political system. It's like asking your friend to order pizza for you, knowing they'll get pepperoni even though you really wanted pineapple. You trust them to make the right choice, but there's always a chance they might not. This system has its critics, but it's the way our elections have been conducted for centuries. The Electoral College was established by the Founding Fathers as a compromise between electing the President by a vote in Congress and electing the President by a popular vote of qualified citizens. It was designed to balance the power between the smaller and larger states. The system has evolved over time, but the core principles remain the same. Each state's electoral votes are based on its representation in Congress, which is determined by its population. This system can lead to some interesting outcomes. For example, it's possible for a candidate to win the popular vote, but lose the electoral vote and therefore the presidency. This has happened 5 times in US history, most recently in the 2016 election. This discrepancy between the popular vote and the electoral vote can be controversial. Some people argue that it undermines the principle of one person, one vote. Others believe it ensures that all parts of the country have a voice in the election. Regardless of where you stand on the issue, it's important to understand how the system works. Your vote is your voice, and it's crucial to participate in the democratic process. By voting, you're helping to shape the future of our country. So the next time you head to the polls, remember that your vote is more than just a simple choice. It's a powerful tool that contributes to the larger picture. Your vote, their points, together they determine the direction of our nation. Thank you for watching. Make your voice heard. Vote. Here's where things get even more interesting. In most states, it's a winner-takes-all system. This means whoever gets the most votes in a state, even if it's by a tiny margin, wins all of that state's electoral votes. Imagine a football game where the team with one more point at the end gets awarded all the touchdowns. That's essentially what happens in the Electoral College. There are a couple of exceptions to this rule. Maine and Nebraska use a slightly different method called the Congressional District Method. They award electoral votes based on who wins each congressional district, plus 2 bonus votes for whoever wins the statewide popular vote. It's a bit less dramatic, kind of like watching a soccer game where you can still win even if you don't score the most goals. Now, let's talk about why this whole Electoral College thing matters. The Electoral College is a unique system used in the United States to determine the winner of the presidential election. Unlike a direct popular vote, where the candidate with the most votes nationwide wins, the Electoral College allocates votes to states based on their representation in Congress. This means that each state gets a certain number of electoral votes, and the candidate who wins the majority of votes in a state usually takes all of that state's electoral votes. This system can lead to some interesting and sometimes controversial outcomes. Remember the 2000 election between George W. Bush and Al Gore? Talk about a nail-biter. It was one of the closest and most contentious elections in American history. The entire nation was on the edge of its seat as the results came in. The race was so tight that it all came down to the state of Florida, where the margin of victory was razor-thin. The outcome was so uncertain that it led to a recount and a series of legal battles that ultimately had to be resolved by the Supreme Court. Gore actually won the popular vote, meaning more people across the country voted for him. This was a significant point of contention because, in a direct democracy, the candidate with the most votes would naturally be the winner. However, the Electoral College system meant that the popular vote was not the final determinant of the presidency. This discrepancy between the popular vote and the electoral vote led to widespread debate and controversy. But Bush won the presidency because he got more electoral votes. How did that happen? The key lies in the distribution of electoral votes across the states. Bush managed to secure victories in several key states, including Florida, by very narrow margins. These wins allowed him to accumulate enough electoral votes to surpass the threshold needed to win the presidency, even though he had fewer popular votes than Gore. Well, he won a few key states by very slim margins, which gave him enough electoral votes to clinch the victory. The state of Florida, in particular, played a crucial role. The margin of victory in Florida was so small that it triggered an automatic recount. The recount process was fraught with issues, including disputes over ballot design and voter intent, leading to a highly contentious and drawn-out legal battle. It was like winning a board game by controlling a few crucial properties, even though your opponent had more money and houses. In this analogy, the key states that Bush won were like those crucial properties on a game board. By securing these strategic wins, he was able to outmaneuver Gore in the Electoral College, despite having fewer overall votes. The 2000 election showed just how important and how controversial the Electoral College can be. It brought to light the complexities and potential flaws of the system. Many people questioned the fairness of a system where the candidate with fewer votes could still win the presidency. This led to calls for reform and even discussions about abolishing the Electoral College altogether. It highlighted the fact that you can become president without winning the popular vote, which doesn't exactly scream democracy now, does it? This fundamental issue has sparked ongoing debates about the legitimacy and effectiveness of the Electoral College. Some argue that it ensures a balance of power among states, while others believe it undermines the principle of one person, one vote. The 2000 election remains a pivotal moment in American political history, serving as a stark reminder of the complexities and challenges of the Electoral College system.